check out the facility, right? Send you if ever you need help. It's not me. I got a guy who's looking. It's always good. Ready? Are you ready? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Andrea and Justa to the stage. Andrea
Hello.
is from Nosh Bakery. Warm round of applause. Thank you, Andrea, for being here. I want to call attention to our stage sponsor, Power Home Remodeling. You can find their information in booth right over there to the right of the stage. My name is Greg Matchett. I'm with US Foods. I am going to be your MC. I'll answer any questions that you have at any time. Just raise your hand. We are here to learn all about Andrea and what your bakery and your business is all about, and whatever you're making today. So take it away, Andrea. The stage is yours.
Hi guys, how are you? Thanks for spending a little time with us. If you have any questions as we go through, Jess is going to be kind of passing out samples, so feel free to ask her questions as well. She's my head baker at the bakery, and so yeah. The Noshery is over by Regis University. It's at 50th and Lowell. I opened it 3 years ago, so we're still pretty new, kind of babies in the industry. But it has been a long passion and dream of mine. I started cooking in restaurants when I was 12, and was able to get a full ride scholarship to Johnson & Wales, and was able to move down here from the mountains to Denver, so I got to still stay local in my beloved state. And now at 27, I was able to open up my own bakery. So that's kind of my past history.
I'd like to say congratulations on opening a business at 27 years old.
Thank you. Lots of credit
or 24 years old, right? Got it.
So yeah, for you today, I just wanted to do like a really simple pie dough recipe. This is from my grandma. It's one of those things that pie dough, I feel like sometimes people have a tough time with, that it's really easy to overwork or it gets kind of tough. And this is that classic pie dough, flaky, buttery, and it's really versatile. When we make it at the bakery, we'll do a big batch of it, and then we'll roll it out into all of our pans, and then we just freeze those pie shells. So then I can pull them out at any time, put whatever filling I want in them, and you don't really have to make a big batch of pie dough every week or whatever. So it's kind of nice for the holidays. You could do this recipe times 2 or 3 and save, one of the shells for your Christmas party, and also have one for Thanksgiving. So,
Well, I have a quick question. Does anybody here make pie? Does it come out perfect every time?
no.
Good, you're in the right. Did you have another question?
For the flour, can you substitute like almond flour or anything other type of flour besides regular flour? Coconut
I would
flour.
want to do a couple different variations. So if you're gluten-free, is that kind of what you're getting at? So I would maybe use like gluten-free graham crackers and ground them up and add a little bit of egg white to it and mix it just enough till it becomes wet sand, and then press that into your shell. For this particular recipe, if you tried to just swap out like all oat flour for it, it's not going to give you that nice layered effect, and that's because of the gluten that is built into AP flour. And some of the
AP, all-purpose
all-purpose,
flour.
sorry. That's how I do all of my gluten-free pies, just because there's so many good gluten-free cookies on the market. I mean, you could do it with biscotti, you could do it with chocolate chips, like any cookie. You could crumble that down and just add a little bit of egg white for it to come together, and then press it out into your shell.
Raw egg white.
You can par bake it for, I would say, 3 to 5 minutes, just to let it to set up. Yep, and then pour your pie filling into it, and then continue your baking process.
So a raw, cold egg white.
Yep,
Raw, cold. Okay, cool.
just till it's wet sand.
Dig it.
Cool.
I like it.
Sweet. Well, so for the pie dough, I have the 1 pound, 3 ounces of flour in my bowl. I've kind of already scaled everything out, so we get to press through time, but my little bit of sugar, my little bit of salt, and you just mix that together, nothing crazy. And then for our wet, you always want to be using cold ingredients when it comes to pie dough. That's going to help us create those layers of fat, which when it becomes baked makes that flaky texture happen. So I have my cold water, my 1 egg, and a little apple cider vinegar. And the apple cider vinegar is in there because it is kind of the secret ingredient to this. It really helps break down your flour so that it doesn't get tough.
So that you're talking about the acidity in the vinegar breaks down the protein in the flour.
Exactly.
Yep.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good.
So
Could I use vodka?
you could add rum in. I just like the flavor of apple cider vinegar,
Very good.
but that's just me. All right. So we're gonna set our wet off to the side, and I've already cut my butter into small chunks. The smaller the better. It's just gonna help your hands. When you're making a big batch of pie dough, if you were gonna do this times 3 or 4, your hands are gonna start to get really sore if you're doing big chunks of butter.
We've got a question.
How many pie crusts are you making with this recipe?
2.
On a 9-inch?
9-inch, yep.
Okay.
14 ounces of butter, just under a pound. A lot of butter.
So I notice you're using gloves. So can we talk about why gloves? Do you use a dough cutter, or do you ever use the food processor?
So you can. I'm just old school in that way. This is how my grandma always makes it. This is how she always told me to make it. The reason I'm using gloves right now is because I want to be able to pull my gloves off and continue on with the demo, but normally when I make this, I don't wear gloves. I don't know, there's just something about the feel of the flour in your hands and the butter, and I just feel like it's like you're giving love to it. I don't know.
Are you taking the butter straight from the refrigerator? Do you need it more room temperature, softer a little, or what?
I missed the first part of that.
Are you keeping the butter cold, or is it room temperature more?
Cold.
Cold.
Everything's cold. Yep. And all of my wet there, I want it all as cold as possible. And again, the reason we're doing this is because we're trying to create layers of fat in the flour, and we're not trying to let that butter melt into the flour, which is when then you don't get your flaky crust.
So I don't know if this trick works. I heard maybe you take your butter and you freeze it, and then you have somebody or yourself take a box grater,
Yeah?
and you could just grate, and that would make it small.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that helps out on the hands, and it makes it a lot faster, because this is the longest part of this process.
But it's fun because you're talking. It's fun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So out there in pie land, when y'all are making pie, what usually is the issue? Are you making a custard pie or a cream pie or a fruit pie? And what crops up that is God, I really wish this would always work? What's your pie questions? Everybody over here raised their hand like they made pie. And then I said, does it always come out okay? And then you said, no, it doesn't.
Whether or not to pre-bake the crust.
Oh, good question. Do you pre-bake the crust or not?
For this pumpkin pie recipe, I don't. And you can use this same pie dough with an apple, and then put your topping, roll out another sheet of the pie dough and lay that on top. And I don't pre-bake them at all. If I was doing, let's say, a quiche with this pie dough recipe, I would par-bake that slightly, because with the eggs, it just won't have enough time to quite set up all the way.
Does that answer your question? Very good. I think I had a question on, has anybody ever made a galette? A galette would be like a free-form pie, and you would use the same pie dough recipe, pâte brisée,
Yep.
right? And then you would, it'll take care of your question, meaning, do I pre-bake my pie shell? You don't on a galette. And they're really cool. You can make them individual. Do you want to talk about galettes for one second?
Sure. Yeah, galettes are awesome. You could use that same pie dough recipe, roll it out, and you don't have to cut them into this perfect circle. You can just take a little bit of apple and some fresh berries, maybe mix them with some sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, and put that in the center of your rolled out pie dough, and then you just kind of fold the edges over, and you bake it right on a sheet tray, just like that. So it's super simple and easy, and it's still kind of that pie taste.
Yeah, love galettes. Okay, I'm gonna go here and then there. Yeah.
Spell galette.
How do you spell galette? G-A-L-E-T-T-E? G-A-L-E-T-T-E. 2 T's in the end. Yes.
I see that you say that you need to wrap it in the plastic film and then chill overnight. I'm wanting to do it all today. Why am I putting it overnight? I should really do it.
You should really do it overnight. For this particular recipe, and you're gonna see why here in just a second. The reason you could kind of get away with letting it chill for 2 hours, but it's really a dry, crumbly recipe, and there's not a ton of wet ingredients. So the reason we want to let that sit up overnight is so that it can all completely kind of soak in. It makes it a lot easier to roll out. It's not as dry and crumbly, and then the pie dough wants to crack on you when you're rolling it out. And that's kind of nice with the holiday baking stuff. This is something you could do way ahead of time, way in advance. And like I said, once you throw it into your shell, just pop it in your freezer and leave it there. And then the day of, all you're worrying about is making pumpkin pie filling or whatever kind of filling for your pie.
We're making turkey. No, I'm just kidding. So I really want to hone in on their expertise here. So you brought up a huge point. We consumers, home cooks, love to cook. However, we don't really understand staggered production. And you know who are the experts of staggered production? Bakeries, right? You can partially prepare something and then finish it the next day. And what is that gonna do? That's gonna save you time. And we all live in time poverty these days, so staggered production is huge. You need to relax the gluten and hydrate the flour. And yes, maybe 2 hours, but you had a much better description of why. But stagger, is there anything in your bakery that you make and serve the day of?
I mean, some of our breads and cinnamon rolls, but everything we kind of do all of our prep the day before. So like our scones, we do a same sort of cutting in our butter into our dry for our scones. And then in the morning, the next day, we come in and we pour our wet into it, we put all of our fruit into it, scoop them out, and then bake them. So we try and do as much production prep the day before so that you can come in and just kind of knock stuff out.
2 questions.
If you freeze a whole bunch of them, how long do they last in the freezer to pull out?
There's no yeast in this, so like as long as you want. I mean, if I'm freezing it, I'll put my pie shell in the freezer, let it set up, and then I'll wrap it in plastic just so it doesn't get freezer burn. But I mean, you could have it in there for a month or 2 months. You just want to check, and I mean, you probably don't want it in there for a year. You're gonna have quite a lot of freezer burn on it, but it's not gonna go bad.
So when you freeze it, do you want to freeze it in the pie tin, or do you want to freeze a ball of dough?
I freeze mine in my pie tin, so then I don't have to worry about rolling it out the next time.
Saving time. Okay, question over here.
Do you ever use a glass pie pan?
Yeah.
And how do you bake that a little bit differently? Because I know sometimes the pie crust is underbaked.
What was the last part of it?
Sometimes the pie crust is underbaked if you put like the fruit fillings and everything in it.
So I guess I haven't had trouble when I've baked in glass before like that, but I think if you are finding yourself having that raw crust on it, then I would go ahead and par bake that for 10 minutes at like 350, and then go ahead, pull it out, and pour your filling in. Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and add my wet to this, and I don't know if you guys can see.
We can see. We've got a really good cameraman.
So it's about pea-sized. My butter has, we might have some larger chunks in here, but overall, it's fairly mealy. There's no big chunks of square butter anymore. But we're not taking the butter and rolling it when I'm cutting it in. I'm just simply pressing the butter. Again, if we rolled it, that's gonna make us not get our flaky layers of fat into all of the flour. So we just pour this in.
Does it matter where you pour the water in the bowl? Does it have to be in the center, or it doesn't even matter?
I don't well it out.
Got
I'm
it.
a little like kind of free form with it. It's gonna come together. The main thing with this is once you add your wet in, you can kind of see I'm not mixing it, I'm not pressing it, I'm just with open hands sticking my fingers in and letting the big chunks fall through my hands. It's very dry looking right now, and this is how it's supposed to be.
So what are we looking for as far as
Finished.
the finished dough? Can you give us some descriptive words?
It should be pretty dry. It should not be all the way mixed in. It should not come to a full dough ball. It's very dry and loose looking, and this is totally what you want. And this is why you want it to set up overnight, so that once it sets up, you can see my dough here, how it looks like it's starting to like really come together. Whereas this looks totally different than that. Same recipe, just 24 hours of letting it set up. And it really soaks in all of that moisture. So once I'm at this stage, I don't want to go anymore. I mean, I maybe folded that 8-10 times, done. It's super easy. Dump that out into some plastic wrap and get it as tightly wrapped as you can and throw it in the fridge.
Yes. Right? It's
So
easy.
this is our final rested dough. And you can see how there's like those big, nice chunks of butter in there. You totally still want that. That, again, is allowing that fat to be layered inside of the flour. So just with a little bit of AP flour, I'm gonna dust my surface. You don't need a ton. And see, it kind of looks cracky. It's fine. That's what we're looking for. That means that you did not overmix it, so that's a good sign. As you're rolling it out, you can roll this dough up to 3 times. I recommend only reusing it twice. And that's particularly just, again, so you're not overworking your dough and you're getting that nice flaky pie crust.
So if you overrolled your dough and you baked it and you're like, it looks great, she was wrong. So what am I looking for in that dough? What's that dough gonna be like if I overrolled it?
If you had overmixed it or
If I
overrolled
overmixed it and if I overrolled it.
So you're not going to see these big chunks of butter in there, which is key for that flaky, buttery crust. If you overworked it, it's going to be all one same color. You want the different variations of the flour and the butter in there.
So how about in the finished
And then
product?
once it's out and baked,
Yep.
it's going to be very tough. And you're going to notice that your pie shell has almost sunk into itself. And that's because it was overworked and the gluten got really tight and shrunk back up.
So what's the opposite of tough?
Delicious, flaky, buttery, wonderful pie crust.
And tender to the touch, like you're gonna just float through that really quickly with your teeth. There is a difference in pastry. It's very subtle. This looks great, chef. Any other questions out there? Questions? Okay. How many pies a day do you make at the Noshery?
Oh,
A lot.
for Thanksgiving, we're a very small bakery. I mean, I think we seat 35 people. But during Thanksgiving, it's like 200 pies. We work overnight for 3-4 days in a row. And our whole kitchen turns into just like this crazy pie making machine. When we're making pie dough for Thanksgiving, we're doing it in giant vats, like these big boxes, and that's all hand cut. Just like how I showed you that one bowl, that's how we make all of our pie dough. We never use covers, it's all by hand. My bakers need lots of energy drinks during that time.
And biceps. Do you have a
Yeah.
do you have a dough sheeter?
We don't. We do everything by hand. Yeah, no sheeter. We're small. As small as the front is, it's even smaller in the back. We have 2 tables that we work off of that we make everything with. And we bake everything from scratch in-house every day. All of our breads, pastries, desserts, everything. So it's
You're blowing
a
me away
machine
right
back
now.
there.
So cool. All right, where do we find the
All right.
mashery again?
So I like rolling my pie dough out to about 1/4 of an inch. I like a little bit thicker crust, but you can go as thin as you'd like. This dough really can. I could roll out if I wanted to, maybe even from here to here, and get multiple pies out of it. I just like a thicker crust. That's just me. So if I'm using a pie tin, I like to give it a little bit of spray. If we were doing that galette, you could literally roll this out, put your apples and berries with sugar, spices, and with the galette, you'd kind of just fold over your sides and then slide it onto a sheet tray. But for this, we're just gonna pick up our dough, and it may break on me. That's okay. You're just gonna push it back together. It's no big deal.
Doughs get holes all the time. You just reform
Like right here,
them.
I got a pretty good crack going. It's just pressing into itself and keep on going.
So did you pick that up with your forearms or with the back of your arm?
I like kind of using my forearms. It's just
Okay.
easier for me.
Yep.
Some people like kind of putting it on the rolling pin and then picking it up and putting it over. Whatever you want to do is cool. I don't know. I just like using my forearms. And I always have a pair of kitchen shears sitting in our kitchen that's only for food, not for anything else. And I prefer to use them with our pies just because they're so much faster. And I feel like when I'm cruising in the kitchen and not paying attention and I'm using a paring knife with the pie tins, I end up cutting myself. I'm just kind of a klutz in the kitchen. So I like the scissor method. It's just quick and easy. And then for your pinching, I mean, everyone has their own way to pinch it, so you can make it bigger, smaller. I like a small pinch where I take my 2 fingers, my thumb and my pointer, and then my pointer here, and I just go around and do a quick pinch. If you start sticking like I did, just dip your fingers in the flour. You could go a lot bigger if you wanted. Doesn't matter. You could keep it a plain cut like that. Whatever you'd like. Voila. So yeah, does anyone have any more questions about pie dough before we move on to the filling?
Doesn't look like it. Keep
all
going,
right.
Joe.
We'll keep moving.
Question? Keep going, chef. All right.
So for the sweet potato that is in here, you totally could opt that out and just use all pumpkin. You could do more sweet potato and less pumpkin, however you'd like to do it. For the sweet potato, I just peeled them and threw them, I chopped them up into large cubes. I threw them into boiling water and just enough till they became fork tender. Strained them out, and then I just mashed them with your good old masher. You could roast them and scoop them out, really however you'd like to make your sweet potatoes mashed, you can do that. I love whole roasting my pumpkin, cutting them in half, scooping out the seeds, a little oil, and roasting them in the oven, and then scooping that puree out. But for the recipe, I just gave you the option of using the canned because it's just easier sometimes to do it that way. So for our pumpkin pie filling, you can really mix it however you'd like. There is a list on the ingredients, and basically the reason I put it in that order for you is so that you don't have any lumps at your end product with your puree. So I may not be doing it the exact order that it's going to tell you to, but you're going to get there one way or another. There's no wrong way to do it. So I'm going to add my evaporated milk in first, and that's just because it's the least amount of liquid. And I like using a whisk just so I can really break up all those chunks and make sure I keep with a smooth, consistent mixture. Yeah.
I'll bet your bakery's a fun place to work. Do you guys have fun there?
We probably have too much fun there.
Justa, do you have a lot of fun there? Okay, cool. Do you eat a lot of your product?
All day long. If you're not eating your own food, then, I mean, what's the point of being a chef, you know? With the eggs, I do like pre-mixing them just with a fork to break up the yolk and the white, but I added that in next. I'll move to my spices and my sugar, and then I'm gonna finish with the heavy cream, because that's the largest amount of liquid. Again, it doesn't matter how you throw all this in there. It just makes sense in my head, and I feel like I make less of a mess splashing stuff around if I kind of loosen up that puree before I get to that large amount of heavy cream.
How many days ahead of time can I make the filling?
As long, I mean, not like more than 7, because that's kind of food health code practice there. But yeah, you could easily make this 3-4 days ahead of time, have all the fillings set, have your pie shell already in the freezer, and then just go ahead and pull that out the day of and dump it and then just bake it off and you're done. So it's a really easy recipe to kind of work into those holiday meal planning, you know? Bless you.
Okay, question.
If you want just a pumpkin pie, you don't want the potatoes in it, do you use the cup and the can? 1 cup? Because you have 1 cup of sweet mashed potatoes, but I mean, you don't want those.
Then just sub it out for 1 cup of pumpkin and you're good to go.
Okay, also I have another question. On here it says you add rum to it. Do you lessen a liquid to put the rum in?
This that I made for you guys today, I just did not put the rum in it, thinking there might be some kids and whatnot. It is getting cooked, so it's not a huge deal, but you just opt out for no. It's just I don't know, I kind of threw that in there to add another flavor if you wanted. Especially like the dark Myers rum or kind of those more types of rum would be really nice in here, but it definitely doesn't matter. So we're pretty much all mixed.
Andrea, your list of ingredients doesn't include the rum. How much would we use?
A tablespoon. Yeah. Sorry.
But you could double it if you wanted
Yeah.
to.
So once I mix my filling, I always like to take my rubber spatula and just go around the edges of the bowl, make sure that you have one smooth consistency, and then dump and go. So I will show you how much I fill it. I kind of overfill my pies, but you could do as little or as much as you like, but I like going all the way up to the edge. And I always give it a little pat with the back of my spatula so that it gets nice and flat. And if you have a little mark like this, I always notice when I have a mark like this, that's where my pie cracks when I pull it out the next day. So if you really can, just take your finger and just smooth that out a little bit. And I notice that I don't have that weird crack that you always get in the middle of your pie. Also, how you cool the pie is really important to that cracking. So when this comes out of the oven, I always put it on a wire rack so it can fully cool from top to bottom. If I put it straight on the table, all that heat collects in there, and then the pie cools at different temperatures.
It's so nice to be talking to a properly trained pastry chef. She's hit all the points. I am not kidding. So fabulous job. Can you tell us like a little bit about either the noshery or where you like to buy your cooking equipment, or just keep talking?
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Over kind of in this area of Denver on, I think it's like 65th and Federal, there's a place called Standard Restaurant Supply. And if you've never been there, it's awesome. That's where all of us chefs go to buy our equipment. And it just has all of those pieces like that you're seeing with our red handled spatulas and our offsets and stuff that are so important to our daily cooking. They have all that kind of stuff there, and the people are super nice and friendly and helpful, and the thing is way too big and it's going to take you forever to walk around, but it's an awesome place to buy cooking equipment, and it's cheap too. It's not your Williams and Sonoma price.
So here's a question. When you decide what to put on the menu for the bakery, how do you decide like what to put on the menu? Like, do you research it online, or do you just have like a fountain of ideas in your head, or how do you stay on trend and relevant to your customer base?
So all of our bakers there are required to be creative and come up with new items. So once they get trained up, we push them to try and add a new item each week that they can change out. And especially for a lot of our bakers that are Johnson & Wales or other culinary students in town, it's really nice for them to feel like they have a creative input, and that also makes us more creative, so then we can come up with ideas for them and kind of help push them. On our cooking side, on our savory side, where we have our breakfast and lunch, we all sit down collectively as a team each week and come up with different specials. We, during the summer months and harvest season, sit down with our local farmers and figure out what we can bring in produce-wise that we don't normally get to have our hands on, and that kind of helps drive the new items that are coming on the menu. And then a big thing is just like going around and eating out and seeing what other people are doing, which is super fun. I don't usually always have the time to do that, but that's another fun way to get creative. And then even just social media, looking at what other chefs that I've grown up with are doing, and I can call them and ask them for help. It's all very collective. And when people come into my restaurant and they want our granola recipe, or they want my pie dough recipe, or whatever it is, I always run in the back and type it up for them, because who knows, they might come in one day with a bunch of Italian apricots, which just happened a couple weeks ago, from their backyard, and then we get to play with those. So it's very community and collective. It's definitely not just me.
Who doesn't want to go work there for a day? I do.
Anytime. We have people come in all the time into the back.
What did you just hear? You just heard a millennial philosophy on how to run a business. That's what I just heard. No, seriously. That sounds really, really awesome.
Yeah.
Right? It's not one person saying this is how it is, and you do it. It's collective, it's collaborative,
Team.
it's encouraging, it's inspiring. So when you eat at home, what do you eat? Like, what's some of your favorite comfort food?
So my head chef and my head baker are my roommates at home, because we can't get enough of each other at work, I guess.
Awesome.
So we have been trading off each night, and we'll go make like a big run to Costco or wherever and just buy a bunch of fresh veggies and meat, and then someone picks up the tab for dinner basically each night. Because being chefs, it's really easy for us to just like eat ramen or SpaghettiOs or Domino's, and we got to make sure we're taking care of our bodies, and so that's kind of been our new thing, which is really fun, because that's also another way that we get to try out new specials and stuff. So that's been our big thing lately.
Tell me about a chef role model you've had, or like an inspiring story from your career.
So I was really lucky growing up in Edwards. We had this high school cooking pro start competition team, and the program is really growing. It's in I think like 25 high schools now here in Colorado. And you had coursework inside the classroom, and then we also had a cooking team that would come after school, and we had a local chef mentor who would help us create our menu for the competition, and then we would train 3 nights a week on cooking our meal. And this chef in town that helped us, his name is Chef Paul Frizzacca. He owns Latour up in Vail. And like, the guy was crazy busy and is running this amazing, like, 4 or 5 star Italian restaurant. And like, for him to take that time with us to spend and training us on how to really cook, and then we would go work in his kitchen. It was one of the hardest kitchens I've ever worked in, but I learned so much. And he really inspired me to make sure that as I was growing up in the industry, that I made sure to do that for others. So now I sit on the Pro Start board and get to judge their annual cooking competition and go around to different high schools and go cook with people. So that was probably the most inspiring thing for me growing up.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
So What do you think of the pie?
Is it okay?
Bravo for
Cool.
the pie, right?
Awesome.
Chef, before we wrap it up, are there any more questions out here? And are you going to be around for a few minutes afterwards?
Yeah.
Okay, so real quick, what do you want us to definitely know about the Nashery Bakery? Where you are located?
We're at 50th and Lowell. We make everything from scratch, in-house, breakfast and lunch. Super cozy, family-run place. When you come in, we do our best to treat you like you're our long-lost friend that we haven't seen in a while.
Like if we order something online or call you on the phone, can you make it and we can go pick it up?
Yep.
Hey, right? Yes, ma'am. There you go.
Are there gluten-free options?
We do. So we're not a gluten-free bakery because we're making bread and stuff and there's always flour flying around everywhere. But we will do flourless stuff. So we have a flourless breakfast oat bar. We do flourless chocolate cake, flourless cookies. And then on our actual menu, any of our sandwiches can be turned into salads. And also any of our breakfast sandwiches, we turn into scrambles or omelets, whatever you'd like. And we're happy to accommodate any allergy. If you are celiac, they'll make sure to wipe down and sanitize all their boards and knives and pans and everything for you.
And I love the tip that you gave today of grinding up a cookie and then adding a little egg white for a gluten-free crust. I'm going to try that. Another question.
Hi, you said that you work with high school students, right?
Yeah.
So, do you do non-paid internships?
I actually always pay any of my interns, no matter what. I don't know, I guess that's kind of like one of those old school things that everyone, when I grew up, I definitely did not get paid for my internship, but I just think it's really important to appreciate people. But we have people come in all the time that do stages, that if they just want to come learn and work for a day, and then usually we don't pay for those because it takes a lot of our time and effort to make sure that we spend that day with them, really trying to give them as much knowledge as we can.
Okay.
And maybe she can connect with you a little later if you have another question. Okay.
Cool.
All right, well, how about a nice big round of applause?
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's going to
Thank
be
you.
great, and we'll see everybody at 3 o'clock for our next demonstration.